Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Call this meeting to order and note to all members present, councilors, staff, there's some guests, local firemen, there's some audience. Thank you very much for coming and attending our council meeting and to share some awards. We'll go to disclosure of pecuniary interest. Any? Seeing none, we're going to approve of the agenda. Can I get a mover? Melanie, Councilor Dion. Move into delegations and presentations. We have fire department years of service awards. We have department that put a lot of years, a lot of service into the community, and I'd like to present them with some awards. So if we can get Chair Wiltshire to come forward.
So on behalf of the Ministry of and Solicitor General of Municipal and Municipal Council, I'm pleased to present the certificate to Pierre Gauthier in recognition of 20 years of service on the fire department. Pierre began his volunteer fire department in June 2000 and was appointed Deputy Chief Mayor in 2020. Yeah, congratulations.
Like to come in, Kevin, for a picture? So you can't see.
I'll stick around. I'll just put Kevin here.
So on behalf of the Solicitor General of Canada, I'd like to present this medal for 20 years of service for fire. We like standing up front.
Thank you. Congratulations. Now I'd like to call on behalf of the Ministry and Solicitor General of Municipal Council, please present the service bar to Kevin Savage for recognition of 30 years of service. And the Michigan Fire Department, he began firefighting in December 1991 and appointed chief in 2008.
And you got one more.
Thank you, and congratulations on all your work you put in outside and your time and dedication to the municipality. Thank you very much.
Mr. Tate, could I ask the names? Could everybody tell me who they are? I don't know how to do.
Paul Weaver, Dustin Lee, Peter Castle,
Paul Watt, Andrew Dresden, Sam Rowe,
Stephen Roscoe, Mike Crow,
Steve James,
David Lee.
Jason Crack,
Ross Hall,
Pierre Gauthier, Kevin Savage.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
welcome to stay once you're always.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to 4.2 of the Power Corporation Community Presentation. Who we have on? Peggy Lund, welcome.
There we go. Hi there. I was muted. Seems to be the frequent thing I do these days. We have Andrea Maddie Oli, who's going to be joining us. She had to restart her computer. The joys of working at home and at work, and things don't always go well technically, but I can certainly start the presentation just to respect your time. And I'm sure Andrea will get in as soon as she can. Does that work for all of you? Okay.
Yes, it does. Yeah, go ahead.
It looked like you had some fun there earlier. It's nice to see that there's more activity happening within the confines of our business worlds these days. So we're really happy to see that things seem to be opening up. My name is Peggy Lund. Some of you, I recognize your faces, but it's been probably 2 years since I've been at one of the council meetings in Wawa. So I say hello. I'm the supervisor of customer service. Actually, as of April 1st, I was reminded that I have 29 years with the company. So it's been some time. We've been through a lot of changes. And of course, the last few years have just been adding to the experience. So just as I'm sure it has been for all of you. So what I'll do, Andrea is connecting with audio, I see. Maybe what I'll do is I'll go into the third item, the customer service, and give her a chance to just acclimate. And then we'll move back to the health and safety piece that she's going to cover off. So, okay, the first item under customer service is customer engagement and OEB expectations. And so we're still reaching out and wanting to have meetings. The last few years, again, as I mentioned with COVID, things have gone a little sideways. Thank goodness for these Zoom meetings. We have Teams meetings that we regularly use. And it's really nice because it still gives at least some sense of meeting. So what we're planning on doing this year is we want to go back to having our annual road superintendent's meeting. Our expectation is it will be second quarter target. We want to give a little bit more time for things to settle in the province, and hopefully with that and summer coming, it will mean that we can have a meeting with everyone in the same room. So what we want to find out from you is whether or not the roads staff have the capacity to join a Teams meeting. If that's what we end up having to do, is there a Teams, do you know if that would be applicable to your road superintendent at a distance? Yeah. Okay, yeah, good. Perfect. Okay, and we also had, prior to COVID, annual meetings where we called it our annual community engagement. And that's where we talked on a much broader level as compared to these meetings. These meetings we tried to very much make specific to the area that we're speaking in or the council that we're speaking to. And so the customer or the community engagement speaks broader of the whole system, speaks broader as far as our 5-year, 10-year, 15-year plans and so forth. So we would like to continue having those. We have noticed though prior to COVID that attendance had dwindled. So we just wanted to see whether or not that would, a meeting like that would be of interest to you. And maybe too, it's doing this remote because who wants to travel 2.5 hours to Sault Ste. Marie if you don't have to? So how do you feel about that? Having a remote meeting on these annual community engagement? Does that interest the group? Or maybe I can leave it with you and we can always have Maury get back to us on it.
Yeah, leave it with us.
Okay, that sounds good. In the fall of 2021, we had our annual customer satisfaction survey. Typically, we're contacting up to 200 of our customers. It does take a number of phone calls these days to reach that many who would be interested in being a part of the survey. But it does provide us insight to what our customers are thinking and feeling, their preferences, and so forth. So what we're finding is that one of the questions is, how do you want to be or how do you want us to advertise outages, planned outages that affect you, and so forth. And our customer base is still very much stating they like the direct contact, the phone calls to them. Many are also mentioning the website, which we do have planned outage information now at our website, which is good, but we're also still directly calling our customers. We've also had 90% advise that they believed we very much provided reliable energy, and overall the survey showed a 95% customer satisfaction, which from the contractor that we hire to do this in the province, he does several utilities. He says that is a fairly high mark. So we're happy with that, but we still know that there's room for improvement. So we will keep working towards getting better. One of the things I wanted to make you aware of is there is a backdoor telephone number to reach our trouble line after hours. And what I'll do is I'll reach out to Maury and provide that number to her. It's a number that fast tracks you into our 24/7 trouble call line. We want to give that respect to communities. Sometimes if it's a larger outage, you're busy with all kinds of things within your community. And so this will get you through to answers. And when I say that, whenever you call that number, if you need specific information, there is always a supervisor on call who can give you a call back. So we just wanted to make sure that that's available. So we'll make sure we get that to you. We also have had an e-billing campaign in 2021 that was Win Free Power for a year. We've selected our winners. And so that's going to be in our next newsletter. And so one of the things that we're promoting, or why we're promoting the e-billing, is that we recognize that it is a way to help the environment, reduce waste, reduce recycling for those communities that have recycling, reduce costs on our end. But every 5 years we go through a cost of study. So it's only good within that window. And then any reduction that we've had is in the next cost of study. So it is something that if we continue to have e-billing customers sign up, we'll continue to reduce costs, and hopefully ultimately it will reduce billing increases maybe, or costs too. So we continue to promote that. Plus there's a lot of really good through the portal where you sign up for e-billing. There's a lot of good customer service self-help. Ways to see what your consumption is, ways to compare your consumption. The next day, you know exactly how you consume power the day before, how it looks to on peak, as far as mid peak and off peak, just the very next day. So for me, I find that if it's a month later, I don't know how I was managing each day in the month. Life is too busy. But sometimes that next day is really helpful. So those are some of the things that we are providing at the portal. We also are currently developing, and we should have very much advertising soon at our websites. It will be in our newsletter about our current contest. And that contest is to win a Kia Niro hybrid vehicle. And that's not just for Algoma Power, it's all Fortis Ontario companies, which are 4 different companies, around 56,000 customers, but still you have a good chance to win it. And anyone who's already signed up for e-billing will also be in the draw. So we want more people in, but we want to also respect those who've already signed up and who are benefiting from it. I'm just taking a look here. Our public safety survey is something that the Ontario Energy Board requires all distribution companies in the province to have every second year. And the purpose of it is that we are regularly checking the pulse of our community to see whether or not there's a good understanding of the safety concerns around power lines. And so what we found with this survey that we just did in January is that we certainly had a better turnout than the one 2 years ago. 68% stated that they knew to call before they dug. That was 50% in 2020, so we've moved up the scale, which is good. Also, when you work in proximity to overhead lines, 68% knew it was important this year in 2022. 22% were aware of it in 2020. And so the correct answer, I should say, is 3 meters for that. But one of the things that we do try to do is focus on where we see a disparity in our newsletter, in our push outs on Facebook and on Twitter, to try to cover that and to keep getting it out there for our customers. So it's important from a public safety perspective. Certainly we like our power lines to be in the air. But if you're working on a roof and you're in proximity, or if you're redoing siding and there's proximity, or trimming trees in your property, or hiring contractors, all those activities are important to consider what you have and where the power lines are. So yes, so we are getting better as a province, and I think that's a great thing. So next is, we do have a new website. It was launched June of last year. And so there's planned outages, as I mentioned earlier. And also that's where you can follow our Twitter feeds during outages. If you don't want to be signed up to Twitter yourself, if you go to our website, click on the Twitter, which is the little bird, it will update in larger outages, like how many customers, what the areas are, and so forth. So we're trying to get more information out to our customers that way. We are also looking, we're offering many forms at our website, but we're looking at continuing to increase the forms and have them be more fillable forms versus just forms to print off that you have to fill in. So we want to keep enhancing the customer options, and especially because our customers are getting more techy too. So we want to make sure we're staying up with them. Our office doors are still closed, and so we have managed our customer requirements very well. There have been a few times where we've had to meet people at the door, but as a whole, what we can offer our customers now has certainly been enhanced since COVID. So it's amazing what you have to do when you have to do it. So we've definitely moved in directions that have us much more digitally and electronically focused versus what we were before, which was a lot more paper. There are Save on Energy programs that are still available, more for small business. And so I would suggest, I believe it's, okay, she didn't, I can give Maury the link for the Save on Energy website. I think it's an important thing, especially for small businesses, to take a look and see where you might be able to take part in that program. And similar to last year, we want to make sure, certainly we hope that there's never a need for it, but we also know that things happen. And we're looking at warming centers, what you might want to do in the Wawa area if there were ever, some major storm, an ice storm, And there may be a need to pull your residents together in one place. And we just wanted to see if and what you're thinking about that, and if there's specific contacts that we would want to update our records with regards to that. And again, I can put that to Maury and have that information come if you'd like to leave it to another time.
Yep, no, we're good.
Okay. I'll make sure then I contact Maury with that. And as far as an emergency contact for the municipality, is there anyone who would be a specific emergency contact for us if it were after hours?
Hi Peggy, it's Kathy.
Hi.
With respect to emergencies, you may contact either myself as the Community Emergency Management Coordinator or Sue Lord as my alternate.
Okay. And so would we need after hours contact information, or would you have the access? Like I believe we have your contact information from a business perspective, so that works?
Yes, it does.
Perfect. Okay, just want to make sure. And again, hopefully we don't need to reach you for an emergency. That is our hope. Okay. And that is it for the customer service piece. So Andrea, I see you've got everything working. Thank you. Actually, you've been here for a bit. So did you want to cover the health and safety?
Mm-hmm. Hi, everybody. Sorry about the delay there. We're slowly transitioning back to the office. I think Peggy probably mentioned, so IT has been moving us along, but I was able to figure it out. I'm always really happy to attend this meeting, and the view is so beautiful. You have that panoramic view of everybody. That's very cool, but I don't see that very often with the other townships. So thanks for having us. And so I'll just cover some health, safety, and environment updates here. So not a whole lot, and a lot of it, you know, the pandemic, most of our initiatives are, you know, us out and about in the community and things like that. But we do have some initiatives that we're still working through. One of them is the community attachments. And I think we've mentioned this over the years. It's a bit of a process that we're going through to come up with a more formal agreement if someone wishes to attach anything to API poles. Just because it is power line infrastructure, we want to make sure that we're not compromising the system at all. So the formal agreement would really just keep API informed, and then the company can provide any important information that may need to be exchanged from a safety perspective. So I would imagine that it looks like sometime mid-year that if you wanted to, whether it's flower baskets or Christmas lights or another, maybe some sort of structure, a sign that you would contact through customer service, and they would direct you to how to access the formal agreement. Environmental sustainability. In previous years, we've worked with local groups to do a lot of community initiatives, whether it's planting or it's providing dollars towards some sort of green effort throughout the service territory. So we're continuing to do that. Like I said, we were slowed down a bit the last couple of years being restricted, but we are planning to continue now that the world is opening back up. We're continuing we're looking to continue some of those initiatives around environmental sustainability. And of course, every year we review our programs, whether it's line rebuilds or it's vegetation management. We're always looking to implement more sustainability and how we're, being stewards of the environment. Okay, there's no questions around that. I will move right into operations. And new work center. So Algoma Power is moving to a new work center. It's in the industrial park area in Sault Ste. Marie. So we're still staying in a centralized area so that customers, we're in the middle of customers throughout the service territory. And we're looking to, construction is well underway. There's actually a building that's constructed now. And I believe the plan is to move into the new building sometime in September. Of course, there will be lots of tweets and feeds that go out to let customers keep them updated and let them know where the new work center will be. And so probably just more to come on that. So moving into projects, so line upgrades and vegetation management. Firstly, we just like everything else in the world, we have had to manage some supply chain issues. So materials, maybe delays, and that's forced us to change some of our projects, where we may need to in case we can't get submarine cable in or things like that. But we are starting to see, and the lead times are, there's a huge delay. So sometimes we've had to, over the last year or two, and we're anticipating more into this year until the world can kind of catch up with where we need to be. So major capital, we actually do for line upgrades and pole replacements. We actually do have a fair bit of work in the Wawa area this year. The first 63 poles north on Highway 17 north, up around Catfish Cabins. I can use that as a landmark there. 63 poles and will be changed out. So we'll have our local Wawa guys completing that job there. Broadway Avenue, right in the town of Wawa, between Winston and Main Street, 22 poles being changed there. Unfortunately, they don't give me any time frames, but I'm sure that there will be more engagement through our engineering department when it comes time to getting locates or, working with, coordinating with any other work that you may have going on in the town. McKinley Avenue, between Algoma Street to Ganley. Did I say that correctly? I hope I did. A small project there with 9 poles being changed on McKinley Avenue. We do have a fair bit of tree trimming and brush cutting happening, basically all outside of the town. So it would be from, let's say, where you enter into Wawa, going to Marion Lake Tower. So most of it brush cutting effort. So we'll have a lot of crews up in that area. It's quite a long stretch of line for us. And then so typically from June to September, we'll likely have our contractors up in the area. And as well as it's a little outside the municipality, but up on our number 4 circuit. So around the Highway 101 area, extending up into Goudreau, there is a high voltage sub-transmission line that we have that will continue to with our brush control program there as well. So we are working, we tend to work a little bit in each area. So Wawa, Sioux, and then east of the Sioux are what we call Deborah and into Bruce Mines. I won't go through each of the jobs, but if you are interested in any of the other ones, I'd be happy to answer any questions on them. Any questions on the work in Wawa?
Go ahead, Counselor.
It's a silly question, but I really get mixed up with Brookfield Power, Algoma Power, Evolution, whatever it's called. Like, how many different companies are involved with Algoma Power? Do you know what I mean?
That's not a stupid question. That's a great question, especially because the name has changed and parts of it have been sold off, but there is a bit of a history lesson there. So, and Peggy is probably can speak to some of the names there over the time too. But they were all one company at one time. So generation, transmission, and distribution.
Mhm.
And then over the years, there have been name changes within that whole company. And then around 2009, the company started to separate its assets. So from generation and transmission, which became Great Lakes Power, solely Great Lakes Power, I guess. And then Fortis Ontario bought the distribution side of it, and they named the subsidiary Algoma Power. Oh yeah, it was called Brascan at one point too. If anybody recalls that name. Go ahead, Peggy. Yeah.
Actually, it's a very good question, and it's not a surprise because, as Andrea said, there's been a lot of changes. But think of us as the distributor. We distribute the power to customers, to businesses, and to small industries and some larger industries. So that is our focus. We used to be part of a larger group, but we got sliced and diced through deregulation and different sales and so forth. So now the only affiliation we have to Brookfield is Brookfield tends to, well, they're a generator. They're actually running dams and managing hydro that way. So they're creating or generating power. That means that they have to then send it into either distribution systems or into transmission systems. Transmission systems go distances, and distribution tends to be in localized areas. So that's why we're a distribution system for basically a good part of the Algoma district. Hydro One has a lot of transmission lines in the province, and our old sister company, which was Great Lakes Power, who's now sold to Hydro One, used to have a very small percentage of transmission in the province, but now it is all Hydro One. Hydro One and us aren't affiliated, except that they have transmission lines feeding into areas where we connect to deliver to the customers and the small businesses. So hopefully that helps. But yeah, as much as we used to be all part of this big nucleus, it's all been, as I say, sliced and diced. A big part of it had to do with deregulation and ensuring that the different entities were being managed and regulated appropriately according to the Ontario Energy Board and the way they designed it. So does that help? And if you have any questions or you want any clarification.
Algoma Power, I'm sorry, Algoma Power is the distributor, and who has the transmission lines?
The transmission lines now are Hydro One.
Okay, thank you.
And there, if you ever come to the Sioux and see where we're located on Sackville Road, Hydro One purchased Great Lakes Power transmission. And so they're next to us in the building. And you'll see that there is a new sign, Hydro One. That happened a few years back now. But as much as we're in the same building, we are definitely, separate. The only thing that we typically meet with Hydro One about is if they're having outages on their transmission line that affect our distribution system, because if they have outages or maintenance, then we have to make sure we're telling our customers who are connected to us. Hopefully that helps, but a good question.
Mhm.
It did help, but it did clear it up a little bit.
Yes.
And you
And
know
I
what's,
got a que-
go
I got a
ahead.
To
question.
top it off, we do share right-of-ways with them. So some of the right-of-ways that you'll see, actually a lot around Wawa, where we'll have two circuits. One will be Hydro One and one will be Algoma Power. So sometimes you'll see the signs if you're, I think Pencase Trail is a good example of that, or around the Anjigami area. And up near High Falls, you'll see a lot. We have a shared right-of-way, but two separate companies along the same right-of-way.
I got a question.
Sure.
I think I heard you say you're gonna change poles on Broadway.
Yes, how did you, I didn't, that's not how I pronounced it, but I hope we're talking about the same place.
It means they're Broadway.
It's Ganley.
No, there's a
Ganley.
Broadway too. 22
Lower
poles.
Broadway.
Oh, sorry,
Lower
did you say,
Broadway.
sorry, did you say Broadway?
Mhm.
Yes.
Let me review. Yes, Broadway Avenue, sorry.
And how many poles are you gonna change on Broadway?
22.
Now, those poles, couple things.
Yeah.
They won't cause an outage, right?
I don't know that for sure, but what I do know, what I could guess is that probably not. Most of our work, if there was, it would be a short outage. But often nowadays, you don't have too many outages to change the poles. But we could definitely find out for sure and get back to you on that.
Next thing is, they're well decorated. Right? Are you gonna
Oh.
put the decorations back on the poles?
Oh, okay. We'll definitely
Lower-
make note.
Lower Broadway?
No,
Oh, it's not on the main Broadway, it's down on the lower part.
that's where they're changing the poles.
Oh,
Our decorations are in upper.
Oh, okay, you're
Okay.
done. Okay, that changes the whole,
Yeah,
picture
if
then.
there was, so if there was anything that, well, the great thing is that the guys live right in Wawa, so they would figure out who to chat with in order to save the decorations. Definitely,
that
we
makes a
would
difference
reach
in
out.
lower
Yeah,
Broadway because it doesn't interfere with any of the businesses.
okay, yeah.
Well, just a minute, you said from Winston Road to Main Street,
Yes,
Mhm.
that's considered lower Broadway.
Main Street is the Highway 101
Yeah.
turnoff,
Yeah.
and Winston Road is the farthest road heading that direction.
Yeah,
So if it's between Main Street and Winston, there are no decorations on the pole. Maybe at the Main Street intersection, depending on the pole right at that location. You're not talking from Main Street up here where we have our decorations.
because there is some stuff on those poles.
There may be one pole, and we will work with Algoma Power to ensure that we take care of it if there is one pole affected.
absolutely, but we'll definitely make a note of it here, and anything that comes back that we need to pass on to the department, we'll make sure that it gets to them. And then, of course, we do what we call field planning prior to going out and doing the work. And so something like that would be noted, and then we would contact, I don't know if it would be the municipal office or, yeah, so that we would contact you and figure out what to do. Likely, if we would take them down and then put them back up, I would think. Was that recorded? But yes, yeah, we would
Yes,
definitely.
we're being recorded.
Yes, yeah, we'll figure that out, definitely. Okay.
Yeah, I've made a note about that, so.
Yeah,
good.
oh, okay, thanks, Peggy. Okay. Any other questions? If not, I'll move right into station reliability, and just a quick update here. So I am speaking a little bit outside of my realm of things. I'm more of a tree worker than I am engineering, but or stations. So, but we do have some upgrades to the system. So every year we take on projects to keep the system maintained. So we have a couple of stations. Last year we built a brand new station in Dubreuilville, and this upcoming year we are looking to upgrade our stations into the Gouli and Batchewana area. So when you're driving down to the Sioux, you've probably have noticed these stations on the way down. So we'll be making some refurbishment or some upgrades in conjunction with Hydro One. We'll also be making some station upgrades on stations east of the Sioux, so in the Deborah area for reliability and contingency improvements there. We are continuing to work to implement our SCADA system. So this will allow us to better manage and to get better data from an outage perspective. We have had some challenges just with some of the, our cellular availability up here in the north. So we've had to figure out, we've either had to wait to evolve in some areas, and we're starting to see where we're getting more broadband and more internet services. So things like that will help that project come along. So we'll be able to work more remotely and get more data from this type of system. Bruce Mines area, the substation there is due for replacement. And construction is anticipated to start next year, but a lot of the pre-planning and will start this year. So quite a few stations that are at what we call end of life and ready to be upgraded to every year, just like anything, just like a computer. It feels like it's outdated the moment you get it. We're starting to see that with some of our more technology, as technology applies more to some of our equipment. Another major capital project, and this one is fairly big, is a broadband program. So the government, in 2021, the government of Ontario passed legislation that enacted the Building Broadband Fast Act. And that is to upgrade internet service across the province of Ontario. No surprise, since we all lived at home for 2 years and not everybody had great internet. So this is really good for the North. We're one of the communities, or we're one of the territories or areas that often we still don't have these services in some areas, or we have a really slow service. So how that impacts the utility is we need to upgrade our system in order to have a joint use where we're housing some of the wiring that's required to upgrade this high-speed internet. Right now, our system is built for power line construction. We do share a lot of it. I think Bell is probably the biggest internet provider where we do share poles, and we have been very active over the last 5 years to upgrade our system where we do have Bell joint use. So the big push, the government is very ambitious. And they usually come out guns a-blazing. So if they want to have this completed by 2025. So we are working internally to figure out where our priorities are for that. And some of this pole replacement that you're hearing about is in conjunction with this program. Vegetation management. So we work throughout the entire service territory. Again, we try to work in each territory. We are very much more on a maintenance system than we have been in previous years. So we came through, since the early 2000s, picking away at establishing standards for our right-of-ways. And then more so in 2014, we went through an entire cycle, through our whole service territory, and we were able to really set a standard for reliability and in service or in public safety. So vegetation and power lines don't live well together. So now what we're doing is really focusing on our brush control program. So the brush grows back with a vengeance, and we are working to stay on top of it so that it doesn't get up into the wires. So we've had to shorten some of our cycle frequencies in order to stay on top of this. And we've introduced more mechanical means of doing our work, and that's helping. But of course, especially up in the Wawa area, a big part of the Canadian Shield runs through that upper part of our system. So sometimes mechanical is difficult. So we're relying on our manual cutting techniques to do that. We do have the large project in that I'd mentioned alongside the pole replacement on Highway 17 North, heading towards Catfish and then to Marion Lake. We are still in the Highway 101 area. There is a tree trimming crew that's working from, I'll say, Anjigami to the Jack Pine Tower, and in the Whitefish area as well. And then on our number 4 circuit. So basically from Anjigami to Hawk to Goudreau. So brushing crew, will be going through. We have some access issues on this line. So we are also working through how to gain better access. Some of the roads have been washed out. We need culverts, and just it's a remote area there. So we're working through that along with the brush cutting. And then we're in the rest of our system too: Bruce Mines, the St. Joe's Island, and Lake Superior Park. And we will continue to do our annual station spray as well, where we go into our substations and spray the gravel with a herbicide. We have a 0 tolerance for any vegetation in the stations. Obviously, they're the first point of reliability. So we manage that program there. Community meetings, nothing planned for this year. Like Peggy said, hopefully everyone's still okay with the Zoom meetings and that. And we'll continue to do that, where we can. But we are working on some more public handouts and things like that for vegetation management anyways. So we will still want to very much still communicate with landowners, customers, and be, let them know that we're still available, even though we might not be talking face to face in their driveway as much. And that's it for operations. I'll pass it back to Peggy.
Thanks, Andrea. Any questions before we move along to the regulatory piece of the presentation?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So on the regulatory, a scoreboard is required to be produced each year. The Ontario Energy Board actually creates it from numbers that all, again, LDCs, which are distributors, are sending into the OEBs. So if you notice, it's in your agenda that you'll see that our scorecard shows that the trend, it doesn't mean that the time is going up or that our outages are going up. It actually means that it's improving when you see the green arrow going up. So just so that you are aware, 2020 is the latest that we have. 2021 will come out about September of the following year. So with 2020, you'll see that the average number of power, our hours that power was out dropped from 7.33 to 6.79 in 2020. And then the average number of times that a customer had power interruptions were down from 3.39 to 2.93. So the target changes each year. It depends on the rolling average. So right now our target is 7.36, and that's for the number of hours, and the number of times is 3.13. So we're definitely under what the target is, but that doesn't mean we can stop, because every year, if we improve, then the number gets to a target that's more of a stretch, and that's good. It keeps continuous improvement happening. So we wanted to make sure you're aware of that. Scorecards are on the websites of any distributor in the province. So it's just interesting to know that it's a way that the Ontario Energy Board wants consumers in the province to know how power is affecting them and outages are affecting them. And then the last item on the agenda, the fun item on the agenda, is rates. Every year we have new rates starting in January, and this year is no exception. We can say that small general, such as your office is there, residential, are up about 2%, 2.3% in that range. Street lighting was affected at 5.37% this year. It's good that you have a lot of LED lights going, so you caught that at a good time because of the increase. I'm just taking a look here. Larger demand type services did have a 7% increase this year. And seasonal actually went down 1.46 decrease. And that typically happens from rate riders. If we collected too much based on our, what we determined might happen, what we basically proposed might happen. If it's less, then there's rate riders in the next year that adjust for it, so that there's a continuous adjustment each year. If you ever look at our website to look at our rates for each of our classes, you'll see that there's a number of rate riders in all of the different tariff sheets. And it's just a way of always balancing it through. So that is it for our presentation. Unless you have any questions, we'll let you get on to other business at hand.
Any further questions? No further questions? Well, I want to thank you very much for your presentation. It's we learn what's going on in the area and what's happening. We don't like the rates, but we can't do much about that. But thank you very much.
Well, thanks for having us. And Maury, you'll get an email from me because there's a few questions that came up. Hi. And we'll make sure that we follow up on some of your thoughts and questions around the work that's being done with the pole replacement and the decorations. Okay. So it was nice to see you all.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
I'm not sure I understand.
Yep, they're waiting.
Okay, welcome, Watson Associates. Going to present a 10-year financial plan. You can have the camera.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I have my colleagues Navreet Bain and Byron Tan, who have been working with staff and ourselves to prepare this analysis and presentation. So we'd like to step you through relatively, well, medium-sized presentation. just to reflect the outcome of different analysis and scenarios that we've provided for council tonight. Next slide, please. So if we just kind of look at the agenda, we'll talk about the scope of the assignment. I will give you a little advance notice. Capital expenditures, so your infrastructure, is going to be one of those dominant issues to be looked at into the future. You're no different than most other municipalities in Ontario, and it's something that the province is basically focused on. If you recall, they introduced this Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act. So infrastructure is a very key area of focus by the province on behalf of the municipalities these days. So we'll come back to that. Obviously, your day-to-day expenditures, your operating forecast we'll look at. And then there'll be, when we combine all of this, we'll be taking a look at scenarios on what the ultimate impact is on your taxpayers or your water, wastewater ratepayers under different scenarios. So next slide. And again, please. So we've been retained on your behalf to look at a 10-year planning horizon for operating and capital expenditures. So this considers a number of different things. As I say, we're looking at the tax-supported operating expenditures, tax-supported revenues, and then the rate-supported expenditures and revenues. And we're blending together a number of different elements. What are the factors that'll increase the revenues, the increase or decrease revenues, increase expenditures, and then the capital, how that is going to impact ultimately on our financial plan. Next slide. And as I say, this really summarizes what I just said. The capital side, which is the expenditures, how we're going to finance that, and then the operating costs and the potential impacts on the taxpayers, ratepayers. Next slide, please. So as I say, well, on the capital side, we've looked at three key components. So right now, council have considered a 5-year capital plan, so your 2022 to 2025. So those are priority items that have been set forth either through discussions historically over the last couple of years with council and have been advanced through the budget. You also have an asset management plan, which was prepared not too long ago. This asset management plan is part of a mandated requirement by the province to look at your assets and by 2025 come up with a financial plan to deal with the continuance, enhancement, extension of your capital assets in order to maintain service levels. So that asset management has a piece of legislation behind it. And I just highlight that for the moment, and we'll come back and talk to that. And then obviously, this transformation study that you did recently provided some recommendations. We've worked through with staff to look at those recommendations. There's a number of them which are contained within here, and some of them which have not immediately been addressed. Perhaps they'll be addressed over a longer term, but right now we've cited the more, well, in conjunction with staff, the more salient expenditures to consider. With respect to growth in the municipality, we're hopeful that there may be some additional growth. Obviously, additional growth brings additional assessment and also brings additional water, wastewater revenues. But for the present time, we haven't provided for anything significant to change. Now, we do know there'll be a minor assessment bump with the new seniors complex. That'll add about $199,000 in assessment. That's a minor amount, but it's always any amounts are helpful. to the bottom line. So we've included that. They'll, on the tax supported side, there is the Ballard camp, which potentially over time is going to be decommissioned. We're not sure what magnitude of assessment change will happen with that. So we haven't embraced anything in our analysis. It'll be something that you'll have to monitor and then see what the outcomes are. The other 2 points, we've looked at reductions in certain operating revenues. We'll talk about that. And then there's reliance on grant funding. There's both operating and capital, so we need to chat about that. Obviously, with provincial spending over the last little while, we're not sure how, and federal, I should say, not quite sure how that'll impact on programs that'll be available next year, the year after, and let's say over the next 10 years. So that's something to be mindful of. And we'll, once again, we'll talk further about that. Excuse me. Next slide. So just at a high level approach, just to kind of put it in a schematic perspective, what we're looking at in the analysis, and I'll start with the bottom couple of boxes. The capital plan is what's reflected on the bottom. So the capital infrastructure is going to be influenced by the transformation study recommendations. Obviously, the asset management plan, which is all of your existing assets, how are they performing, and what do we have to do so that they continue to perform, or do we have to replace them, or make some significant expenditures to extend the useful life. So the asset management plan is going to have an impact. And then once again, just right now, your shorter term municipal capital plan, which reflects council's priorities of the day. So there's the expenditure side, which is the first box on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, there's financing arrangements. Some of those, if it's grants, those are external revenues, which won't affect your bottom line. But for whatever isn't eligible for grant funding, has to be either paid for through direct transfers from your operating budget, or maybe transfers from the reserve funds, or ultimately debt charges if you can't generate the revenue in any other resources. All of those will generally have a long-term impact up to that green box, which is the net impact on your tax rates, or alternatively on your sewer and your water rates, if we're talking about obviously sewer and water capital. The orange box just talks about, with respect to some of the capital, there will be impacts on your day-to-day operating expenditures. So we've discussed that with staff. If you double the size, let's say, of a water treatment plant, there's going to be an increase in operating costs. So there's always potential increases or decreases as a result of the operating, the capital budget onto the operating. And then we have the two purple boxes, which are really holistically your operating budget. So you're going to have increases with the operating expenditures, which are either going to be funded through non-tax revenues. So they could be fees, fines, fares, or other types of contributions that you have with different constituents currently. And then the latter, once you've exhausted all of those non-tax revenues, the top box says, okay, here's the impacts on the basic taxpayer. So you have an assessment base right now, and what do we need now to fund the net operating expenditures, and what's the impact on the taxpayer from year to year to year. So we'll come back and talk about those through this process. So those are the key things, the key steps that we're going to talk about. What's the capital expenditure side? What's the operating expenditures, and what is going to be the net amount that has to be generated through rates and taxes? And then we'll take a look at operating expenditures and then the operating revenues. Ultimately, it all comes down to that green box. What's the impact on year to year on your taxpayer and your water and your wastewater ratepayer? Next slide. Excuse me. So we're going to start with that bottom blue box, which is identifying the infrastructure requirements. So your expenditures. So the first slide is going to be tax supported. Second slide is going to talk about your rate supported. Well, actually, we'll talk about tax supported revenues, and then we'll talk about rate supported expenditures. So you can see there's 3 lines that have been identified, and we're going out over 10 years. I would note that these expenditures, we have inflated them, obviously from year to year to year, and especially if we're looking over 10 years, inflation will have an impact on those expenditures. So we have inflated them at a modest rate of 2 to 3% per year. Looking at the transformation study, arising from the recommendations made through that, what we've included is about $7.7 million in expenditures. The big ticket items are the marina divestiture, that's about 1.3 million. The town hall upgrades, about 3.5 million. Electronic records management, about 45 million. And then there's been a number of other items arising from the recommendations that have been included. So you can see most of those are being looked at over the 5-year planning horizon, the biggest expenditures showing up in 2023. Asset management. So on the operating side, I'll jump down to the 3rd bullet under that. Your asset management plan said when it analyzed roads and different types of facilities, arenas and town hall and et cetera, basically said you needed to, on average, into the future, spend about $2.5 million a year on capital. Now, what we've included above is not at the level of 2.5 million. It's really looking at the level of expenditures that you have currently, which net of grants is roughly about $800,000 a year. So that's, you can see in the first 5 years, we have amounts that are 2.4 million, drops down to 64, then it goes up to 300,000, then 1.3, and then it levels off on an inflated basis as we extend out in the future, about 800,000 a year. So that is basically the level of spending you have right now, the net spending, the impact on the municipality. So we've continued as a provision that level of spending. Keep in mind that 800,000 is significantly below the 2.5 million, but that's where you're at this point. So we've continued that. The last line is other capital needs, and these are what you as a council have identified as priority items, and we have included in the capital program. It's about 10.6 million. And what's included in there is the arena modernization, about 3.1 million. Waterfront phase 2, about 2.2 million. The MMCC improvements, about 1.1, and then there's a number of different items. So we've expressed the continuance in these in this forecast, and you can see over the 10 years in total, in inflated dollars, we're just under $28 million as the target figure that we need to fund if we're going to continue with these expenditures. Next slide, please. Looking at, excuse me, funding levels, you can see that I'm going to go to the second bullet, which is identifying that of the 27.8 million, there's a sizable amount of grant funding that we would look to rely upon to fund a lot of these expenditures. So we've got federal and provincial gas tax and some specialized grant funding, which would help to address the town hall, the arena, the marina, school zone surface rehab, the waterfront phase 2, and the airport equipment. So we're looking at a sizable amount of grants to assist in this funding. It basically provides for about 63% of that $28 million. The other funding, you can see we've made transfers to the capital budget. So that's basically directly from your operating budget. We're raising through taxes and we're providing for a certain amount to be moved from the capital, from the operating up to fund the capital. And then on top of that, we do have acknowledge some reserves that are there. And then at the bottom line, if we exhaust all those other resources, then there are debentures that we need. And you can see in 2023, just under $1 million, about 900,000, and then ultimately about a little over 400,000 in 2025. So when we talk about the base case, the funding scenario, we're trying to address these expenditure items as part of the base case. So we're assuming that these are your basic needs. Once again, acknowledging that from the asset management, we're only picking up about a quarter, maybe about 1/3 of what's been deemed through your asset management plan as the required expenditure, annual expenditures. But we'll leave that for the moment. Next slide. So looking at the water wastewater side, so the rate supported services, you can see that once again, we have the 3 categories. Transformation studies identified a small amount, basically doing master plans for the water and the wastewater service. And so there's provision in the range of about 185,000 in total. The asset management plan provides for about 2.2, or sorry, asset management period is about $2.2 million. That's providing for roughly, let's say on average, $200,000 a year. Keep in mind that your asset management plan suggests that you should be spending at a level of $1.8 million a year. So you're 200,000 versus $1.8 million, which is in the asset management plan. Once again, we'll set that differential aside. We'll come back and talk about that later in the process. Other capital needs basically is you've got the about 3.6 million in works. Some of that is the water intake valve that needs to be done, completed. And then there's a number of other projects that have been identified by staff in the more immediate term. And that's basically part of your 2022 capital budget, which you've already seen this year. Next slide. Looking at the operating, at the funding for the capital, you can see that transfers from the directly from your water wastewater operating budget to help fund that is about just under $600,000. You've got a number of grants and reserves you've got capital reserves at about 1.6 million, equipment reserves at about 200,000, and then you got OCFA of about 300,000. As well, we're looking at about 2.7 million in grants. And then lastly, we do need some funding of about just below 700,000 with respect to debentures. Excuse me. Next slide, please. Now, just in very simple terms, we've looked to forecast increases in the day-to-day operating expenditures. You can see we've looked at salaries and benefits at about 3% per year. Obviously, salaries go up with inflation. Benefits, as we've been experiencing, are actually going up at a faster rate. So we've averaged those at about 3%. Utilities and chemicals have been growing up at a faster rate than inflation. We've assumed 5%, which is fairly reflective what we've seen over the last 5 to 7 years on average. And then all other expenditures, we've assumed basic inflation of 2%. On the revenue side, you can see on the black line is basically the increases year to year for the operating expenditures for the tax supported services. Now, if you look at the kind of turquoise line, that bluish line, this is the operating revenues. This isn't property taxes, but this is all other revenues. And you can see that a number of revenues are being inflated at 2%, but we're looking at certain revenues decreasing over the forecast period. So we are foreseeing an actual minor reduction in the operating grants. And that would be a pressure, obviously, on the rates. If you're not increasing at the same level as your operating expenditures, there's a slight upward pressure. You know, in and around, in totality, this would say we're looking at maybe about a 3% annual impact on the general taxpayer. Now, on the rate supported, which is the next slide, you can see, once again, we've done the same type of 3% for salaries, benefits, 5% utilities and chemicals, and 2% for all others. You can see the level of expenditures increasing in that black line. We have seen a drop in your operating revenues. The largest drop is basically anticipated through the sewage dumping fees being lost for that one camp. That'll lose about $116,000 in revenues that goes towards these expenditures. So that's that line moving from 2022 to 2023. That's the drop of about 115,000. Once we experience that drop, there's a minor increase generally in the revenues over the 10-year period. So ultimately, we'd see on average about a little over 3% annual increase in the operating expenditures. The first drop, we're going to see a 62% reduction in our revenues. From that point, averaging over the rest of the term at just below 2%. Once again, that's going to have an impact on the ultimate ratepayer. Next slide. And again, please. So I spoke earlier that we wanted to provide for the municipality a couple of different scenarios. So you'd have a feeling for some of the decisions you would make and what the long-term impacts of those decisions are. And this is an important time to look at this. So we've combined all of that information that we've just presented, and that is basically your scenario one. And that's what we're calling the base case. And I think we kind of talked about this. If you roll it all together, what you're going to see is roughly a 3% annual tax increase. We could sustain that, and a 2% wastewater rate increase. Now, that is, when I say it's sustainable, or let me use a different set of words, not sustainable. It's doable, but it's doable over, let's say, maybe as long as 10 years. But those level of increases are not sustainable given, once again, the capital infrastructure. And that's where we get into, well, if we went to item 2 and we just added 1 extra percent to the tax supported, so we go from a 3% annual increase to a 4%, and then on the water wastewater, if we go from 2 to a 3% increase, what does that do? And we're primarily looking at the sustainability of maintaining the capital program. And that helps because I'll just jump ahead. If we look at base case number 1, we're actually draining the reserves, and we're not able to keep up with the amount of money that's available to fund your capital. So we're actually going to exhaust all of your reserves, generally a little past the 10-year period. And then you're sitting there with no financial resources available. We don't believe that's necessarily a positive long-term decision. But once again, it's a shorter-term decision, and then you'll have to contemplate what the longer-term alternatives may be as a result. The 1% at least keeps your level of funding at where it is today. And it assists in least, if you call today's level of spending sustainable, it maintains for the most part that sustainable level. So 3% for tax, 2% for water isn't quite where it needs. It needs to be annually at 4% annual for tax, annually at 3% for water, wastewater. We've then said, okay, if keep in mind there's the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act. And if we need to fully implement the asset management plan, which appears at the initial cut to be where the province wants you to be, then we're just saying, okay, here's the high end impacts on that asset management plan. And that's something that you need to probably keep in mind, keep it in your back pocket. And as we move forward to that full implementation of that piece of legislation, I think there's an opportunity for the municipality to reach out to the province and say, well, wait a minute, this will be significant impact. We need to have additional grants guaranteed if we're going to maintain our services. So we've run this in order for you to have that perspective as you move forward in time. I think, that full implementation are considerable impacts, but maybe somewhere between item 2, and if you get significant grants through the province, maybe it might be marginally higher, but that's something where we are advising, especially in the north, all of our clients to keep in their back pockets and to be prepared to go to the province at the appropriate time. So I will come back, we will come back, and we'll talk about item 3 for you. The last one was to sit with the base case. So that's item 1, that's the 3%, 2%, and then say, if over time the hydro dam grant is phased out, and phased out over time, not all in 1 year, but looking at phasing it out, what potentially are the impacts of that? I know that the transformation study touched on this, gave some perspectives, and as a result, we talked with staff and we said, okay, let's take a look at phasing that out in a reasonable fashion and what's the implications of it. So that's what item 4 is solely taking number 1 and just adjusting off of that so you can see the order of magnitude of the loss. So if we can run through quickly, we'll give you these perspectives. So starting with scenario 1, excuse me. So you'll recall basically over the time horizon, the average for the 10 years works out to about $1 million a year. A little bit higher in the first 4 or 5 years, averaging down at about $850,000 to $900,000 at the latter part, but running at about $1 million a year. So in order to, and we've run the scenario at 3% on the tax supported side, and we've looked at the implications. On the rate supported, you'll recall that we're running at a significantly lesser level. The level of funding is at a high amount. It does have some grants and subsidies, but it's not funding your level in the asset management plan. Next slide. So if we take a look, and what we're trying to display here is if you take your rates, okay, so that the amount the taxpayer is paying, and if you take a look at the amount of those bills going towards operating, going towards existing debt, and then future transfers to the reserves, you can see that going at 3% per year, what it'll do is your total budget will go from about $10.9 million. So that's the 2022. And by the time we hit the end, it'll be $12.9 million. Now you can see that the largest growth is between the operating expenditures, the 9.3 going up to almost 11.6 million by the end. And in order to achieve that, what's happening And to stay at 3% is that your debt payments are dropping from 283,000. And obviously you're paying them off over time, and that's a good thing. So the debt payments drop down to about 94,000. But if you take a look at what you're transferring to the operating budget, you're starting at 1.3 million. And by the time we hit the end, you've dropped down to 586. So where you would think, or you would hope that, gee, if as we're paying off the debt charges, we should be able to transfer that money, to the operating reserves, and that'll help us fund everything. But you can see that at 3% tax increases, the capital side is being burdened with less and less and less money, at a point where the province is pushing us towards asset management plans, addressing our capital needs. If we only stay at 3%, we're losing pace with respect to funding our capital program. So that's not necessarily positive. That's where I say it's the level of spending can be continued, but I don't believe where the money's going makes the municipality sustainable. So that's something that needs to be considered. It would appear the base case isn't strong enough in order to support your capital replacement plan. If we go over to the operating for the rate, if we look at the impact on the taxpayer, if we only stay at 3%, then we'd be looking at between 2022 and 2023, you'd increase the tax bill by $80. So this is an average tax bill based on, I think, $100,000 assessment. The next year, you'd increase by $82, then you'd increase by $84. So basically, you're stepping up in logical amounts with a little bit of inflation of $80 inflated over time. But once again, that's an amount which the taxpayer would probably look to as perhaps they would deem reasonable, slightly above inflation. But as I say, I don't think from the municipal perspective, it's totally sustainable. And we'll come back to that. If we look at the tax supported side, similar type of thing, you can see, and this is consistent with water and wastewater programs. Water and wastewater are very heavily oriented towards the infrastructure side. So your operating costs, you can see, are like in 2022, are 635,000 out of 1.6 million. So really that's running at about 40%. So it's only 40% of the total expenditures. On the tax supported side, completely different. You can see you've got the red or the burgundy area is your debt payments. That's going to increase a little bit. We talked about over $600,000 needed in the early stages. And then the transfer to reserves is going to drop a little bit, but then we're trying to grow it. It goes from 812 down to 656, and then we try and grow it a little bit. But this is based on only seeing 2% annual rate increases to the taxpayer. So as you can see, if we total once again your debt payments and your capital reserves, we're running at almost $1 million, just a little shy. By the time we get to the end, we're actually dropping down in the level of expenditures. Not as dramatic as on the tax supported, but we're still losing ground with respect to the capital infrastructure. And remember, we're only spending less than half of what we need for the asset management plan. So once again, is it sustainable? It's doable over the short to medium term. It's not necessarily defined as sustainable. Next slide. So if you look at the impact on the taxpayer, you've obviously got two components of your charge. You have that monthly base charge, and then you have the variable rate, which is based on how much water is consumed through the meter. So we've looked at the average bill, consuming 180 cubic meters a year. And so based on that, a water wastewater user in 2022 would have a water bill of about $959. Each and every year going at that 2% will basically give us about $20 a year. So $20 for the 2023, another $20 increase in 2024, another $20, and so on over the forecast. It's slightly inflated, but that's the level of increase running at about 2% per year. And then to recap, it's doable, but not necessarily sustainable with respect to your infrastructure. Next slide. Now we get into the scenarios, and we just like to present you or recap where we were earlier. This one provides for the 1% additional increase. So tax supported instead of at 3%, if we put it at 4%, how much additional revenue does it generate? And we've targeted towards capital reserves. So the money is there to help finance additional capital expenditures. So that provides for additional capital expenditures. It really generates about $400,000 a year in additional capital or money that will help fund the capital program. And then on the rate supported side is about $70,000 a year, which once again helps us fund the infrastructure. Now, next slide. Now, we haven't done the graphs, but what we wanted to present is what that impact is on the taxpayer. And basically, both of these scenarios bring you back to the level of spending for capital that you're doing today. So instead of that decrease, it basically brings you back to almost a level of status quo funding. So moving that extra 1%, it all goes towards capital through the reserve funds, and it basically provides you with a level of status quo in funding. And you can see we've given you the, like in the top chart, the top table, you can see the white line. The first line is the annual tax bill, and we've broken that into two different components. The base case, which we provided a couple of slides ago, so it's $80 and 82 and such. And then we've given you what that extra 1% would generate in a tax bill to the taxpayer. So it'll be an additional cost of $27 a year, or roughly an extra $2 a month to the taxpayer. So in total, they'll be going at instead of $80, they'll be going at 106, and then 110, 115. But that continues at the level that you are currently. Not that you're fully implementing your asset management plan, at least you're sustainable in the level of funding that you have right now. And then on the rate supported, similar type of thing, it translates into an extra $7 a year, and that brings you to your total water bill increase, wastewater bill increase, $27. So that extra 1% on both sides means that your water, wastewater, taxpayer would basically be adding an extra $34 a year over the base case. And that has a significant impact on your capital plan. Next slide. Scenario 3 says just, okay, what if the province came in and said, okay, you're filing your asset management plan. We now want you to fully phase it in, and we're mandating it as a result of of our powers under this Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act. So what we've assumed here is that you will be increasing it on a stepped rate, and it'll be over 10 years. So we're not going to do it obviously in 1 year. I think there'd be, if we ever got mandated, I'm sure there's an ability to negotiate with the province and say, look, it has to be sustainable to the taxpayer and the ratepayer. Let's try and do it on a 10-year plan. So this may be at the high end, but we wanted to present this to you so you have that understanding. So what it would do is increase your taxes by about 5.1% per year. And that'll get you up in the range of about $1.8 million annual expenditures. On the capital side, there's about a 7% annual increase to get you up on the wastewater side. If we take a look at the impact on the taxpayers on the next slide, tax and ratepayers, you can see that we've started this in 2024, not obviously 2023. And that would, in the first 10% jump, would add on the tax side an extra $86. And on the rate supported side, an extra $66. So going full asset management, but only in the first year, would jump us up by in the range of about $150. And then we'd be increasing from there annually. Next slide. The last one was just to say, okay, what happens if we start to lose our grant funding for the hydro dam grant? And we've looked at dropping the grant revenue by about $200,000 a year. Second bullet acknowledges that there is an expense on the other side, and that would be $75,000. We'd lose that expense. So the net impact is losing about $125,000 a year as you're phasing out that grant. And if we take a look at the next slide, you can see that we would be looking at $80. We'd be looking starting in 2027, an extra $65. The next year, we'd add another $65. Another year, we'd add $64. So you would be adding incrementally about $65 per year, year over year over year, in order to phase out the net grant. So that would have, once again, an impact based on your taxpayers. And just summarizing here, I apologize for the complexity. I know there's a lot of numbers, lots of things to look at. But this is basically just saying, if you want to look at percentages, and maybe that's the easiest way on your tax supported side. So this lower quadrant, we believe that 3% on the tax supported is the base. We don't believe you should be any less than that, but we don't believe that's doable, but I don't believe that's sustainable at current levels. Probably 4% is a much wiser decision given your capital needs. If you go towards phasing in your asset management, it jumps you from that level up to roughly a 6% annual increase. And then if you basically are at some point, and we start in 2027, losing the grant money for the hydro dam, it will add incrementally an additional 2% per year compounded over time to the taxpayer. On the rate supported, you can see similar types of numbers. We started at 2% annual. We believe 3% at a minimum is sustainable at today's level of spending. If you have to go towards full asset management, you can see your impacts are going to be in the range of 7 and 9% per year, compounded each and every year. And the hydro dam scenario on the rate supported side has no impact because it doesn't affect your rates, your water wastewater rates. So just in summary, we once again we observe, as with most municipalities in Ontario, the capital program is an area of focus. And asset management plans through the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity is an area of focus for the province. The province can't come up with grants for everybody across the province, so they're forcing municipalities to at least increase to a level which they deem, I'm sure, at least sustainable. And then you can go and talk to the province about what levels of contributions are needed in addition to that. We would believe that scenario 2 is your best course in the short to medium term. That's the 4% rate increases for tax, 3% for water, wastewater. As we've noted, currently, you're at least in the short term, your existing capital program heavily reliant on grants. Obviously, if the grants are being received, it may delay some of those capital projects. On top of what you hope to receive, you'll need to, with respect to your asset management plan, probably making a case to the province on additional sustainable annual contributions to help you address your capital program. We talked about the hydro dam grant. That's something certainly to be monitored. You need to consider how you're going to deal with that if there was a movement towards losing that. So that's something we just put out for council's consideration. Obviously, what we've provided you is at a higher level. I believe these are reasonable scenarios. We work with staff. We've worked with respect to water and wastewater rates. We do about a third of the municipalities across Ontario. So what we're seeing, what we're talking about on those areas is no different than what we're seeing. Actually, we're seeing more significant increases in a lot of municipalities. Those level of increases on the water and wastewater rates, actually, I would say are not bad, given what other municipalities have experienced, but that's always, it's a matter of perspective. On the tax supported side, yeah, I think what you're seeing is very reflective of other municipalities. So I think the last slide says we are open to any conversations, questions of council. More than happy to talk about what we've done and to provide you any additional insights. I'll return it to the chair. More than happy to respond to any questions at this point.
Go ahead, councilors, any questions?
I have one.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Is there any way that you could help us with a plan to deal with the dam? To get the money?
Sorry, the question is there any way you can, which with respect to the dam?
Way that you could help us deal with getting money from the dams continually, because I really do think we deserve it.
Obviously, we haven't delved into all of the mechanics of the grant program. We've had discussions with staff. I'm sure they would have initial insights. Anything that we can contribute, we'd be more than happy to do, but we haven't delved so deep as to provide insights into all of the mechanics of your current relationship.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Councilor Dion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Watson, I wanted to thank you very much for your presentation. It was very thorough, and I really appreciated all the scenarios that you've laid out for us. I'm a new councillor, so I did have some concerns about long-term sustainability in our budget, and it really did help me. I think, so in my mind automatically goes to, if we are, a solution is to increase our revenues. Would a recommendation on how to increase our tax base, I guess, would be to, bring in new construction or industry attraction, and other economic development measures. I guess that would help to result in a net increase to our tax base and help us keep our tax rate lower, correct?
Absolutely. If you can enhance your property tax base, get more users hooked to the water and wastewater system, that generates a level of revenue which would help to either you either go with scenario 2 and any additional revenues helps to move you towards scenario 3, or you go with some hybrid.
Thank you. Any other questions? I got just one comment. I think it's a reality that what we bring in, what we put out, and the infrastructures and the capital projects, it's inevitable that we're going to see a report like this because we all try and keep the tax dollar down and because we don't get enough revenues, and then keeps the municipalities happy, but in the end, our communities start falling apart because they can't operate in their dump trucks and the bridges start falling apart, stuff like that. So this is just a little bit of a reality check. I'd like to thank you for that.
You're more than welcome.
Okay,
And I
no other
just-
questions. We really appreciate your presentation. I don't know if Lori, anybody else got any comments?
I don't think so, and I thank Gary and Navreet and Byron who were instrumental in completing this report. Certainly, they did it in consultation with the Treasury staff and relied on our staff's help. I think it is a great report, and it will take some time, I think, for council to digest. So I would recommend, Mayor, that council take some time. And Gary and his team have said that they would be available to council at a future date. Once council gets a time to consider the recommendations and wants more information or has more questions, they would make themselves available to mayor and council in the future. So maybe we'll leave this report with council and staff to review and bring it forward at a future time that council would want to discuss it further.
Go ahead.
And back.
That's excellent, Maureen. I would be interested in speaking with Mr. Watson about how we stack up to other comparable municipalities of our size. And if their tax rates if he sees, if he envisions their tax rates kind of increasing at the same level, over the same time period. Like we're all.
I know right off the bat, I can comment on your water and wastewater rates. I haven't done comparators for tax supported side, but I will say that your water and wastewater rates are very reasonable relative to a number of other municipalities across the north, and even across into Ontario. As I say, we do about a third of Ontario, and water, wastewater combined rates running at, roughly about $930, $950 actually is a very reasonable water and wastewater bill annually, considerably lower than many, many other municipalities, and even across the north for sure. Because we've recently done some rate studies for other municipalities not too far from you. We've done 2 or 3 over the last 6-8 months, and so I am familiar with the comparators. Tax supported, we haven't looked at, but that's something obviously we can provide if that was important to the council.
Okay, with that, appreciate that. We'll say goodnight to you.
And I just want to thank staff. Staff have honestly been amazing going through this process, very insightful and very, very helpful. So we do appreciate their assistance. And with that, have a good evening. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll get back on.
We're gonna get a copy of this.
Yes, there is a copy on the council agenda, but we certainly can provide paper copies if council would like a copy in their boxes. I'll make sure there's one for Councillor Shaslow and anyone who would request.
Okay, we'll move on to business horizon. There's none of the previous, 5.1 corporate planning meeting minutes. Can we move it for that? Councillor Cameron. All in favor? Motion carried. Move on to number 7, new business. We got a land acknowledgement report from the CEO. Maury, you want to go ahead with that?
Thank you. As council is aware, at our last corporate meeting on March 15th, a request was made through the Wawa Heritage Committee in Johanna Row for council to consider a land acknowledgement at future council meetings. Staff reviewed some background to the matter, and I would just like to point out that the use of land and territorial acknowledgements has become a practice in the majority of municipalities in Ontario. This started out of the 2015 Truth and Reconciliation Commissioners Report, who recommended that such acknowledgements should be used. Creating land acknowledgements is an important way that we can recognize reconciliation and recognize traditional treaty lands. And several municipalities use such statements at the beginning of their council meetings. Several municipalities have implemented such land acknowledgement statements, but there are no standard wordings, phrases to be used. And it is recommended that statements used by council should reflect the contribution of all Aboriginal peoples, including Métis, and recognize our local circumstances. So for consideration of council, staff is recommending that we develop a land acknowledgement policy. Such a policy for council would outline when that acknowledgement would be used, what wording would be used, and the such. So for some examples for a policy to be brought forward to council, if council agreed, we would recommend that we use such an acknowledgement at the beginning of council meetings, regular and corporate, that we use the acknowledgement at special meetings of council, including the inaugural session of Wawa Council following the municipal election, and council meetings where there are any matters discussed, whether publicly or in camera, dealing with land, dealing with zoning, dealing with any matters that relate to the use of the land. We would also recognize if we are reporting on a matter to council that has to do with the corporate strategic plan, the official plan or official plan amendments, again, those normally dealing with land matters, that we also use the acknowledgement. And at special council meetings and events that are deemed of importance, that the acknowledgement be used at municipal dedication ceremonies, at the opening of any new facilities and infrastructure, or other special events as directed by council. So those would be some of the items we would include a policy for council to consider and make recommendation on. So with the assistance of Councillor Melanie Pilon and referencing the traditional territory acknowledgements in Ontario, that's been published by the Ontario Federation of Labour, and we also researched other sources and materials. The following land acknowledgement is proposed for council's consideration to be included in a policy. We, or I, will begin this meeting by acknowledging that we are gathering on the lands that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples since time immemorial. We would like to acknowledge that we are in the Robinson Spirit Treaty Territory, and the land on which we are gathered today is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe. Specifically, we acknowledge the neighboring community of Michipicoten First Nation, to whom we have great respect. I also recognize the contributions of all Indigenous people, including the Métis, in shaping and strengthening the community and province of Ontario. Once council has adopted a land acknowledgement policy, it is recommended that Chief Tangi from Michipicoten First Nation be invited to attend a future meeting of council to officially acknowledge the municipal land acknowledgement. Further, we would also recommend that council include a land acknowledgement statement on our Wawa municipal website. So in conclusion, we bring this report forward to council, looking for council's review and direction, and recommend that council direct staff to prepare a policy to be brought forward to be approved by council at an upcoming regular meeting. Thank you.
Any questions?
Lori, how many bands did you mention? Isn't that Cree and Michipicoten First Nation?
We, excuse me, recommend that we acknowledge all Aboriginal peoples, including Métis, And we provide a special mention that we acknowledge our neighboring community of Michigan First Nation, which we have great respect for. So we are only acknowledging our neighbor, but we are acknowledging all First Nation people and nations.
And that's acceptable.
Again, yes, I believe it is, and it's recommended in consultation with Councillor Pino, because there is no legal requirement or wording that's specific that I could bring to council that would be a standard format. It's developed in consideration of local circumstances.
And in our policy, if there's any changes. Thank you.
Any other questions? I got one question. Is this all 3 paragraphs, or 1, 2, 3, or is this individual ones that we look at? This is all.
It would be one paragraph. I just put it as 3 separate sentences for the ease of reading. So yes, wherever you see we, I should have indented it, but yes, it would be one statement with those 3 sections.
Okay, no, I think that's awesome. This will come up at,
The next regular meeting of council on April 19th.
7.2. Memo municipal forest fire management agreement. I think this was brought up once before and you tabled it and.
Yes, Mayor. Oh,
Okay, sorry.
sorry, Mayor. Yes, Mayor, Councillor Hatfield had requested some information on the training, and council had severed the reading of the bylaw at last council meeting. We're bringing it forward again. And on behalf of Chief Kevin Sabrens, who we all hope is celebrating, enjoying his 30 years of service outside, that he provided a report and followed up with the Ministry of Natural Resources and wanted to respond to council that this fire agreement was to be signed by March 31st. It is a normal practice that we do, and we have asked for permission to delay the approval by a week. It does require council approval by bylaw. We do provide an annual stipend that protects us almost like insurance if any forest fire ever starts in our municipal boundaries, because we do not have the capacity within our fire department to fight any major forest fires. And if we were to pay the going rates for fire protection, we would be paying way more than our policy. But having said that, the concern was about training, and the fire chief has advised council through this memo that in return, in terms of training, they have received previous training on the forest fire agreement requirements, and he followed up by phoning the MNR and this new agreement, the changes that now the ministry is going to provide fire instructor training kits for each course that can be utilized by our local fire department in training the staff. So the MNR does not provide the training. We have enough experience within our fire department in training. They've been trained before, but they will get these kits, and the officers in those trained will train the rest of the department. So we have no concerns that our department is not fully trained to meet the requirements of this bylaw, and recommend that council approve this bylaw this evening on the regular agenda.
Any questions on this? No questions? Thank you then. Okay, we'll bring it up at the next meeting. Go on to 7.3. Yes. Corporate accessibility policy. Kathy, you want to go ahead with that?
Yes, thank you. So earlier this year, the municipality of Wawa received a notice from the Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility. It was in regard to our compliance report that we had submitted, and the ministry issued an order to us to update our policies because we were not compliant with its employment policies related to the integrated accessibility standards. Because we were issued this order, the CAO and I felt it was important to create a new policy that was all-inclusive, that would address all accessibility requirements under one policy. So what we did is we created this new policy. It was forwarded to the AODA, which is the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, and they have agreed to the contents of the policy. So very quickly, just to run down what those changes are. Number one is the formation of an accessible advisory committee. So this committee would consist of the mayor, the CAO, and myself. We would review the standards that are required and then provide a report and educational material to council on an annual basis. Accessibility planning, we would review the multi-year accessible plan and provide an annual update of the actions taken by the municipality. And it's the same as the report that I provided to council in November of last year, November, December of last year, and it was posted on our website. So we were in compliance there. Accessible formats and communication supports. We would continue to provide accessibility through various means. So for example, a person with a hearing impairment, they can utilize the Bell relay service. So it acts as a link between the TTY and telephone users. So they would call the toll-free number. They would provide their message to the TTY operator. They would listen to the individual. They would type the message and then send it to us. The service is free and it doesn't require any users to be Bell customers. So it's available to everyone. What we need to keep in mind is that accessible formats and communication must be provided in a timely manner, and the cost to provide the accessible format should be no more than what we would charge to other individuals that requesting a different type of format. And of course, it doesn't have to be cost prohibitive to the municipality as well. Training. We are required to provide accessible training to all of our staff, council, committee, board members, third-party contractors with respect to the AODA requirements. Most of our staff have received the training. Not all the members of council have received the training, more specifically the 2 new members, but the remaining members have. With respect to contractors, this would only impact on our garbage collection contractors in dealing with customers related to customer service. So training would be provided to Provo contracting. Admission fees, there should be no admission fee for support persons attending an event or any program with a person with a disability, so we waive those fees. This is something we've been doing for everyone. Assistive devices, if the municipality purchases any type of devices to provide accessibility service to the for community use, then we would have to ensure that it's in proper working order and that the public is advised that this equipment is available for their use. Such equipment may be a wheelchair, or maybe it could be magnifying screens at the post shop or at the town hall. So we just have to let the public know that they are available if needed. I've already addressed the issue with respect to the contractor providing garbage services. With respect to notice for service interruption, it's really important that we provide notice to the public with respect to the notice of a disruption, the date of the disruption, the anticipated duration, and the description of alternative facilities or services that are available. So for example, if the wheelchair lift is broken at a community center, we would issue notice to the public advising that they are to use a different entrance to access the arena surface or through the main entrance to access the banquet room. The municipality does accommodate the use of service animals for most of its facilities, and these notices are posted on the front entrances of our facilities. One area where service animals are not permitted is in the areas where there's food being served or being prepared. So, yeah, they can't go into the kitchen. Oh, in the kitchen, yeah. Yes, they can sit in the dining, but they can't go where their food is being prepared. Workplace emergency response is an area where we did meet the requirements. So for example, if we have to provide an accommodation to an individual, it's important that we find out what those needs are. And this includes if an employee changes a work location. So when an employee identifies a barrier that could arise in an emergency situation and provides a suggestion on how they may overcome this barrier, the municipality must determine how the accommodation or assistance will be required for the individual. So for example, if an employee who has asthma requires assistance due to fire or exposure to chemicals, the person may require a buddy or another staff person to provide assistance to them by obtaining the medication. They would need to know where it is stored or providing assistance to them leaving a building that's filled with smoke. But of course, this individual or the employee would be required to provide consent to the municipality to share the information with anyone designated to help them. So their private information about their health concerns. Another area that we are required to make changes is the return to work or accommodation plan. The municipality is required to have in place a return to work process for its employees returning to work due to a disability or requiring disability-related accommodation. So there is a questionnaire that would be filled out by staff when they've been off for a period of time, and it would outline what accommodations are required, and we were to meet those requirements on their return to work. So basically, that covers off what the changes are in the new corporate accessibility plan, and it is our recommendation that council first of all accept my report and adopt the corporate accessibility policy and its appendices to meet the requirements as issued under provincial order received from the AODA, and we are ordered to comply by April 30th. So time is of the essence for the adoption of the new policy. The training program is currently under development, and it will be provided to all staff, council, committee members, third-party contractors, and council is also recommended to adopt the training program. We will be using the materials as found on Accessibility Ontario on their website. Any questions?
Any questions?
I do. You said that people with disabilities, like especially in emergencies and that, so how are you going to gather that information through those sheets that you have?
Yes, so there will be a questionnaire issued to all the staff. They will be required to fill it out, the same with council members, committee members that are using our facilities. And if they self-identify these disabilities, then we will come up with a plan to assign somebody to assist them during an emergency.
So this is going to come up at council meeting?
Yes, we have prepared a bylaw to accept, to adopt the policy and its policies. For tonight.
Just I feel like it's a good time for you to
We are still not there. Yes, yes, it's all under one, it's all inclusive, so it addresses all areas of the accessibility. Yes.
That was the best time to do it.
At the end of the night. The mayor would have to ask
And you have to receive majority. So would you expect the mayor can hear?
So, yeah, so Mr. Mayor, if you wish to add an item now during the agenda, or during the meeting, my apologies, you would have to have a mover and seconder to allow you to, bring the notice forward. And majority vote to say yes, you speak about a separate item that is not on the agenda. Yes, ma'am.
What we'd like to do is clarify the water situation in town right now. So I'd like to bring this item as an item on the agenda tonight. So if I can get a mover to support that. Councillor Chason. Seconder, Councillor Pilon. Any questions about that? All in favor to have that put on? Okay, motion carried. Do you want to do that right now?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As council's aware, we had some concern with our water quality that occurred around the dinner hour where some excess chlorine and over our normal amounts was added to our water supply. Since then, all our staff have been working very, very hard with the Ministry of the Environment and with our Algoma Public Health Unit. They've been monitoring the situation and they are just about to release a press release. I'll bring it up for council perhaps to read in the regular part of the agenda. It's not formulated yet because the press release is going to say that the amount of chlorine in the water is at a safe level and that there is no need for council to consider any press information relating to a boil water advisory or any more type of serious advisory. What the press release will say is that the community should be aware the water is safe to drink. You may notice the smell of chlorine in the water. We will continue as a municipality with our partners to monitor the water situation. But since that chlorine was added, it has dropped down considerably in the last hours due to the efforts of our staff. It is a fluid situation and we have advised all emergency personnel in our hospitals. But unfortunately, Mayor, some information is being posted on social media, on Facebook, that is raising concern in the community. And so I ask council through the mayor to do what we can to alleviate the community's concerns. Unfortunately, some information got out that was incorrect and we just want to correct it this time. We'll be issuing a press release as soon as possible and use our local media and radio station to try to get the truth out there. Bring this update to council in an effort to make those aware who are watching that the situation is under control and there is no oil water advisory or immediate concerns. And we will continue to update council and the community as quickly as possible as anything we develop. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, we'll move on. 7.4, we got a draft HR disciplinary policy.
Yes, thank you. And we proposed this draft policy. Our policy hasn't been updated since 2013. There were some sections of the policy that need to be updated. Essentially, it's the same policy. This will set out a discipline policy where the first actions are discussions, understanding root causes, and taking all actions other than formal discipline actions to resolve any human resource actions. Normally, we bring these policies and draft to council, and then that provides us opportunity now to share this with our staff and any members of the public who might want to provide input into this draft. So the purpose tonight is to introduce it, provide council opportunity to make comments before the next meeting council, and we will share it with staff to look for comments. So I will just summarize by that.
Thank you. We want to 7.1 questions, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the only comments I wanted to make, great policy. I was wondering if we were able to reflect the unionized environment by perhaps including a statement that maybe allows for the union to be notified if a unionized employee is receiving disciplinary action or a statement that speaks to that unionized employee is able to contact their union rep in the event that they're asked to meet and talk about disciplinary action.
Absolutely, and that's excellent advice. I would just state that those clauses are included in the collective agreement already. So any discipline that involves unionized employee, they have the right to involve their union steward or their union designated of their choice. I will make sure that in this policy that's maybe clear that the collective agreement does not supersede the policy. However, in the collective agreement, the policy around discipline is not set out. So this works hand in hand with the collective agreement, and we will be sharing this with our union contact to ensure that the unionized environment has opportunity to comment as well, but I definitely will make sure that something's included.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to 7.5. Mr. Collins, Golf Course Club debt expense write-down.
Good evening. Just a little bit of background. In 2016, the municipality made a loan to the Mishpacotton Golf Club for the purchase of equipment. And over the last few years, they have been paying down that loan. And there's been a couple of years of write-downs of capital purchases that they've made for the club. So this year, there were capital purchases made in the amount of $20,994.06. Sorry, not this year, in 2021. And they're requesting, the club is requesting that the loan be paid down by that amount. That would bring the balance of the loan down to $12,297.74. So bylaw number 339421 allows for this write down. So the recommendation is that we move forward with it.
Any questions?
I do have a question. Especially in light of the presentation that we just received about capital purchases and sustainability. I'm not in favor of writing down capital expenditures for an organization that's outside of our mandate. I feel like this is basically a forgivable loan to Mishpacotton Golf Club, and it sets a dangerous precedent to other organizations in the community. And I think that's where I'll leave it right now. But I think that this should count. Should other members of council feel that they would like to go ahead with this, I would request a recorded vote. However, I am a big supporter of the golf club. I do golf myself, but they did attach their financials. I would like to see the golf club make an effort to pay these back.
So I'd like to just note that in the first 3 years of the agreement, there were payments made. It's just last year and this year that they were requesting the write down.
And the write-down is compared to what they spend, right?
It's exactly what they
Yeah.
spent. So they gave me a list and I went through the list and I ensured that the amounts that we were allowing were capital. They were for actual capital equipment. Anything that didn't meet that definition, we excluded.
Go ahead.
Have we done this for other nonprofit organizations in the community?
Not that I'm aware of.
I read the bylaws before the meeting. I asked Manuel to provide me with the bylaw to provide additional background. And I did see that they've made, just shy of $30,000 in payments on a $153,000 loan. It's still not suitable with writing down or forgiving the $20,000 amount. They don't understand, perhaps they don't understand the background, and perhaps if we tabled it and I had additional conversations, I would get to a better, have a better understanding of this, but at this point, I'm not.
We did do a lot of talking about what we did, and it wasn't an overnight decision. With the Mayor Rhodey and council at the time, and we decided to do that for excellent reasons. And I would suggest that maybe we talk to Lori, and I think you understand it better why we did what we did. But at the time, it was an excellent decision.
I mean, you still feel that way about it. So, get this up for now. We're gonna set it, but bring it to the camera. No discussion now. And everybody would be aware of what happened in the past.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of meetings that played before this. The reason why this is taking some time. So if you wish, we can come back to,
I'm not sure, 7.5, is that on the council agenda tonight, or is?
It is on the council agenda tonight, but I don't believe this is an in-camera item. I think this is a item to speak about just quickly.
What we could do is, well, I guess we vote on it. And see how that goes. So we can do- Yeah, so we'll leave it there. Right now is a discussion.
you want to be part of the.
Exactly, yeah, that's the way we do things. Go ahead.
For the last, from 2019 to 2020, that's because of COVID, that most of their financial difficulties are, right?
If I remember correctly from there was a memorandum last year as well, and I think it was part of the consideration was the fact that it was something that people could do outside of COVID, right? Because you can go golfing and still maintain your 6 feet of distance, and it created a recreational opportunity for people. And I believe that council last year wanted to support that initiative.
But how many years do you support it?
So it was 2019, we wrote down 13,567. In 2020, 77,900. And the 3 years prior to that, there were small payments.
It had to do with, Lori might be able to explain it better, but we had a choice to make. We could either keep the club going or really having to shut it down. And it was a really big asset to Wallow. That was one of the reasons, but there was other ones too. But I think Lori might be able to explain it better than I am.
We're talking about the loan right now.
Yes. What I can recall was that the golf club was really experiencing issues about 10 years ago where they were getting close to having to close. The revenues were not equal to the expenditures. The municipality agreed to purchase the golf course. So the municipality owns the golf course, to the best of my recollection at this time, but they retained the buildings. And then the municipality passed a bylaw to lease back the operations, responsibilities, liabilities from the golf course back to the golf course. That was done under several years of negotiation to ensure that we were doing everything properly according to the Assessment Act. It was deemed a municipal capital facility. Ergo, the golf club at that time had been paying approximately, from my recollection, $30,000 to $40,000 back to municipality in taxes. And because we deemed it a municipal facility, they no longer had to pay a property tax. The municipality took that on. Now, having said that, that led to the golf club, to the best of my recollection, coming to council saying it had some real emergency capital needs. I remember it was 3 pieces of equipment and were around grass cutting and maintenance pieces of equipment, and they had no choice but to finance those pieces of equipment. Because their financials would not support the borrowing of any money from any financial institution, council made the decision to loan that money with terms that stated that the golf club would pay back X amount per year that it could afford of its surplus. Then I believe Manuela in her report says in 2013, Manuela,
16, 17, 18, maybe.
but they came back to council and asked council approximately 2 years ago
Yes.
to adjust the requirement for them to pay cash, and that would council accept that the write down of the outstanding loan amount be able to be reduced by amount equal to the capital they had to invest. They had to make some large capital investments, and this was one way that they could write down the loan rather than the alternative of them coming back to council to look for more loan financing. So council did approve by bylaw an agreement that stated that council would accept that any capital purchases, and as Manuela has stated, by definition, it must be a capital piece of equipment, that council would agree to write that down annually until the loan obtains zero. What I can say to council tonight is that when this bylaw was passed, it was the intention of council to provide support to the golf club who was struggling, and this was one way that council could provide support. There is a bylaw in place. When that bylaw was written, both Manuela and I spoke with our auditors to make sure that would be legal, wouldn't cause an undue hardship for the municipality. At this time, that's all I really can provide council is backed up, because that's all my memory. Tonight at 9, we'll recall. The options always there for council to cancel that bylaw and cancel the agreement. I don't know that that would be a recommended course of action.
However, I think when I read the bylaw, it offered 2 separate options. If the golf club ended the year in surplus, then the municipality is in a position to ask for payments, or request payments.
I don't have the bylaw right here.
Manuela clearly wrote in her report that the golf club ended the year in surplus. And I think that's the point that I'm trying to get across. We just received a report that clearly said our current trajectory is not sustainable. The municipality has a heavy reliance on grant revenue. So I'm just underscoring the things that we've heard time and time again. And it's $20,000. I mean, it's not a hill that I'm going to fall down on. However, it is something that we need to be very cognizant of. We have 2 options here, and they're clearly written in the bylaw that was passed.
And thank you for that. And unfortunately, I don't have the bylaw. And I think what would be advisable is, because I can't speak to the golf club financials very clearly tonight, but they did take a loan from the federal government when COVID started at $40,000, and that loan is on their books. But I can't say much more than that. So maybe you would like the Michigan Golf Club to come back, or staff to write a further report and meet with the golf club to provide some background to their request. And staff would have no objection to further information being provided at a future council meeting.
I think that would be.
We'll bring it to regular and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I apologize to council for the ins and outs, but we are dealing with trying to get that press release out as quickly as possible. So having said that, I have to ask, or maybe council could tell me if that bylaw's on the, is it on the regular agenda? Does it need to be severed? I apologize. I believe it. So we might have to sever that when the regular agenda comes.
Why?
Is it on the agenda, or you're not going to vote on it? If you vote, okay. Okay, sorry, I wasn't here. My apologies. A second.
Okay, we'll move on to 7.6.
And we got CAO, draft bylaw for EDC Tourism Committee.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I know it's been a long night and I will try to summarize the recommendation of staff for council very quickly. This was an item that council talked about last fall, so it's not new to the agenda, but it's expanded upon to actually provide council with a draft bylaw and terms of reference recommending that council consider enacting a Economic Development and Tourism Committee of Council. As council knows, with the transfer for the full responsibility of economic development tourism to the municipality this year, and the impending closure of the Economic Development Corporation, or closure going into a hibernation mode of the Economic Development Corporation happening soon. The Wawa strategic plan under TED number 4 identified the formation of a committee to council on this matter as one way to continue the momentum of many projects. The Tourism Advisory Committee would provide advice and strategic direction and recommendations to council. That would be their primary role, is to provide advice and recommendations to council. They would act in an advisory capacity. They would make recommendations related to economic development tourism. They would assist in reviewing and recommending the implementation of the next item I'll speak about on the agenda, the Wawa 5-year tourism plan, COVID recovery strategy. They would have a committee presence with at least one member of council involved to exchange ideas about programs, initiatives, consult with the community, collaborate with other groups, and bring suggestions forward. So in essence, without going through each line of the proposed committee, it is recommended that the term of the committee, similar to all committees of council, end at the end of the term of council. So this committee would only have a mandate until the next council is elected, or in the wording you say until the next committee is appointed. But either way, this committee would have a short time frame unless the new council elected and who come into effect on November 14th continue to agree that this committee should exist. The composition recommended to council, to have a committee of 7 is the ideal size for making sure we have quorum and fruitful and effective discussions would be recommended as having 7 voting members and having some non-voting members. Those voting members are proposed, but this is something for council to consider. Having 1 member of the Wawa Business Improvement Association, having 1 member of the former Economic Development Corporation of Wawa, having 1 member representing specifically the Wawa tourism sector, 1 member representing Wawa small business sector, 1 member of the general public, and 1 member of council, or if council chose, its designate. The non-voting members would be the mayor, the CAO, tourism staff, and any other staff to record meetings of the committee. It would be possible to extend the committee from a composition of 7 to 9 members, and our recommendation to council, should they wish to consider 9 members, would be to provide 1 member to be reserved for a Wawa youth representative, and number 2, 1 member to represent Aboriginal members of our community. So the draft bylaws attached, setting out quorum rules, the purpose of the committee, and selection of chair. And so we do recommend that council review the attached draft terms of reference and bylaw. And if council approved, we would bring this forward at a future regular meeting for approval. We would follow with advertisements to the public and going through a selection process to make recommendations to council on who would form the committee, with the view that the committee would ideally be appointed in May and would start on its role by June 1st. Thank you.
Any questions?
I have one, Mr. Lori, there seems to be a lot of people involved with BBC. You think maybe as far as the tourism, there should be more people more interested in tourism than BBC? Do you know what I mean, to balance it out? I mean, it's just a thought, because tourism is one of the biggest things wrong. I don't know, like, I don't know who it would be there, but when I read your form at home, I thought it should be more involved with tourism.
Certainly, council could designate an additional spot and increase the size of committee specifically for someone in tourism. We do have one position designated for a business involved in tourism. From my perspective, I think you have a good observation. However, when we think about who represents Wawa Small Business, when we think about who represents the BIA, what's going through my mind is most of those businesses people do have some role in the tourism sector. Certainly council could suggest that we increase the committee size or take a recommended member, reword it, take it off. So it's certainly a point that council could consider in the composition.
The person from the BIA is definitely on a business, like they represent a business.
Yes, the Wawa business members today do represent businesses and they represent people within the BIA boundary.
So then that sounds better, Lori. I didn't understand that. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Maureen, I had a similar observation to Councillor Hatfield in the fact that, but I wanted to kind of just maybe have a clause that would allow us flexibility should somebody from maybe the Wall Family Health Team position recruitment position or a member of industry. I just wanted to kind of just allow for future without having to draft, amend the terms of reference or something like that. And without having to use that one member of the public. And I thought maybe we could get around that by just adding like maybe a catch-all phrase to be amended or be voted on by the rest of the council. This committee, but I'll leave that to your discretion on this. That was my only comment. Great. Thank you.
I always gotta be careful that you gotta know committee as well. And you gotta stay focused on what the committee is all about. It's about tourism and economic development. So should stay within that frame. But I mean, this discussion is great. There's so much different things that could happen. So I think your idea of get a base committee and let the committee really come up with those ideas and decide that they want more input or more scope of the community, something like that.
Absolutely. The voting membership, I just noted and reminded myself, does say 2 members representing the Wawa Tourism Committee. I forgot to note that for council. But it could be written if council wants a certain position reserved and the rest at large. It could be 7 members at large, whatever council would decide, and we could put in the terms of reference. But you've already, it would be hard because you've already appointed the members to the committee for them to say who should be on the committee. So you can't really have the committee. I think for council, there is no urgency. We can bring this back on the 19th with some ideas and from staff's perspective, you could have up to 7 members of the public. And then when you advertise, you can have some minimum criteria that anyone who applies has to demonstrate what their background is in tourism, what their interest is in small business. So you could have, even though it's open to the public, you could have qualifications to apply in case it would fall to council right now, the way the bylaw is written. If you had an excess number of people apply and you had to select the selection process, like an interview, those 7 members. So this could be written to represent 7 members or more at large.
Yeah, we don't have to, this is right, this is the corporate, this is what this is about, discussion. So we can bring it back to, for discussion again, and any ideas or anything, we can get them back tomorrow at the same time. So it could be rewritten or just discussed again. So we can bring it back later then.
Just think we have such a short time that we're only gonna be, only till the next election, and then things could change all over again with whoever, you know, is back in, so the sooner you get it started, I think the better off.
Okay, I'll vote, we just give some feedback and we'll bring this back in, what is it, 19th?
April 19th in bylaw form.
Bylaw form? Are you okay with that? Okay, well, we'll do that. Okay, we'll move on to 7.7. 5-year tourism plan, terms of reference.
As I believe was reported by our Director of Tourism, Alex, through the monthly reports I provided council, the 5-year Wawa Tourism Plan dash COVID-19 recovery strategy has been prepared. And it is a terms of reference where the intention is that we would send this out as a request for proposal from bids from qualified consultants with background in tourism to help the community prepare a 5-year tourism strategy. With the underlying concern that in this strategy, we want to make sure that those tourism businesses in our economy that was adversely affected by the impacts of COVID-19, whether it was being closed, whether they saw reduced business, that would be addressed in the plan as well. So I've attached for council an outline of the tourism terms of reference. So that's the goals and objectives of this strategy. I've attached a copy of the request for proposals outline for council to view. And I wanted to provide opportunity to council to provide input and approve that the staff have made application to FedNor, the federal government, for funding under the Tourism Recovery Program of the federal government for funds to complete the study. The study is estimated to take between $80,000 and $100,000 to be completed. We hope to hear from our funding partner a positive response, hopefully by June. I would recommend to council through the report that this is a task that could be overseen by any newly formed economic development tourism committee. That could be something that a new committee could oversee. So if a committee were formed by June 1st, I would anticipate if we get a positive response in a timely fashion, that this process could begin in June. In terms of the background, very quickly for council, this absolutely aligns with Wawa's strategic plan. It's outlined as an action plan, 10-6, as a key priority identified by council to be completed in 2022-23. It does support the municipal council's goal of aligning tourism and economic development to facilitate the development of growth of a diversified and sustainable economy by supporting tourism growth and entrepreneurship. So it does meet council's priorities for the year. In terms of reference, again, it will be heavily focused on involving all stakeholders to provide input into the development of the plan. That includes our residents, our businesses, those tourism associations that cover our area from Algoma, Kinawabi to NOTO, the Northern Ontario Tourism Outfitters, to those provincial and federal organizations that all have a role in tourism. So the study would be comprehensive, look at a 5-year horizon, involve great public consultation, and we recommend that council approve that we issue a request for proposals in May to receive consultants' pricing on the proposal and subsequently report back to council about the results of our RFP subject to funding back to council as soon as possible.
Any questions?
Yes, I have one.
Go ahead.
Are you going to have somebody hired for the job by this time?
No, we have made application for funding to various funding partners for any staff to help us on a project by project basis as needed. So at this time, this study will start under the auspices or the responsibility of Alex Patterson, who's our Director of Tourism, and he'll oversee the study, hopefully with the council approved committee of economic development tourism, the tourism staff that we've already hired, and of course, ultimately council.
Oh, you have hired some tourism.
Yes, we
But
have.
you haven't hired an EDC person yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
Any other questions? Oh, go ahead. Okay, we'll move on. There's no in camera. There's no business arising in closed session. Next meeting is going to be Tuesday, April 19th. German, can I get a mover? Councilor Peel. And we're going to close the meeting at 9:15. Thank you very much.
Can you take a 5-minute break?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, that would be nice. Or you could probably run out of time. No, I don't know the rules. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay, good evening. Let's call the meeting to order and no 10 members present. Move on to 9:26, start the meeting. Number 2, disclosure of gain or interest. Do we have some?
Yes, I, Councillor Kathy Cannon, declare potential indirect pecuniary interest on agenda item number 14.3, legal issue. I'm an employee of the Parks and Rec.
Okay. Then we're going to get to that in the bonus. We'll go to number 3, approve agenda. We have a resolution.
Moved by Councillor Chason, second by Councillor Pino. Resolved that the agenda for the regular meeting of council scheduled for Tuesday, April 5th, 2022 be approved as amended.
All in favor? Motion carried. Allocation of presentations. Number 5, there's no announcements and give of notice. There's the library board, a few ones down there. Adoption of minutes, Tuesday, March 15th, we got a resolution.
Moved by Councillor Pino, second by Councillor Chason. Resolved that the following minutes of council be adopted as presented. Minutes of the regular meeting of council held on Tuesday, March 15, 2022, as contained on pages 1 to 8, inclusive of the minute book.
All in favor? Carried. Again, with the correspondence, all three to read some stuff. Share your spare time. Enjoy. Go to number 8, consent agenda.
Moved by Councillor Chason, seconded by Councillor Pino. Resolved that the items listed under consent agenda 8.2 and 8.3 be approved as recommended.
All in favor? Motion carried. 8.3, approval requisitions for wall use prints, sorry.
Moved by Councillor Hatfield, seconded by Councillor Pino. Resolved that the Council Corporation Municipality of Walwood is hereby approved the following requisition for framed wall goose prints in accordance with policy number PR 001. First one is Russell Reed, requisition number 338. Second is Liz Talley and Clark, requisition number 339.
All in favor? Carried. Staff reports, receive staff reports, resolution.
Moved by Councillor Pino, seconded by Councillor Hatfield. Resolved that the Council of the Corporation Municipality of Walwood does hereby receive the following staff reports, a copy of which are attached here to A, CAO 2022-01, Land Acknowledgement, B, CAO 2022-01, 5-year tourism plan terms of reference, C, CC 2022-2, corporate accessibility policy.
All in favor? Motion carried. Down to new business. Approved write down of debit expense, Michigan Golf Course. There's a resolution.
And this will be a recorded,
This will,
this
Are you
will be a
requesting
recorded
a-
vote.
are we requesting
Yeah.
a recorded vote?
Or to table it until.
I'll think I'll vote. What would be a
Recorded vote.
recorded vote?
Moved by Councillor Cannon, seconded by Councillor Hatfield. Whereas the municipality of Walwood entered into a loan agreement with the Michigan Golf Club through the passage of bylaw number 2891-16 dated August 9th, 2016 to purchase new capital equipment and amended by bylaw number 3394-21 dated May 4th, 2021. And whereas the agreement set out that the loan was to be paid back over time without interest, and no terms or conditions were developed requiring a minimum annual payment or term of the loan. And whereas at the end of December 31st, 2021, and an outstanding loan balance was $33,291.80. And whereas the Mishpachatan Golf Club has requested council of the municipality of Wawa to approve a reduction of $20,994.06, which equals the amount of the 2021 purchases of needed capital equipment to maintain the golf course facility in lieu of cash payments to the municipality to the outstanding loan balance, bringing the amount only as of April 5th, 2022 to $12,297.74. And whereas given the importance of the Mishpachatan Golf Course to the community for social, recreational, and economic viewpoint, municipal council supports a request of the Mishpachatan Golf Club to reduce the equipment loan for any capital purchases with proof of payment for said equipment. Now therefore be it resolved that the council of the corporation municipality of Wawa is hereby authorized the repayment of the loan by the Mishpachatan Golf Club to the municipality of Wawa and approves a write-down of $20,994.06 in 2022. Mayor Pat Tate,
In favor?
Councillor Kathy Cannon,
In favor?
Councillor Bill Chason,
In favor?
Councillor Mitch Hatfield, Councillor Melanie Pilon,
Not in favor.
and the motion carries.
Bylaws?
Moved by Councillor Hatfield, seconded by Councillor Cannon, resolved that the following bylaws be introduced and read a first, second, and third time, and that finally passed, and that the mayor and clerk do sign and seal the same. Any rule of this council to the contrary notwithstanding, bylaw number 3485-22, to repeal bylaw number 2620-12, and authorize the corporation municipality of Wawa to enter into an agreement with the Minister of Northern Development, Mines, Natural Resources, and Forestry for the province of Ontario for the purposes of fire management with respect to the prevention and control of grass, brush, and forest fires. Bylaw number 3487-22, to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held on the 5th day of April, 2022. Bylaw number 3488-22, to authorize the corporation and municipality of Wawa to enter into an agreement with Her Majesty the Queen and Right of Ontario as represented by the Minister of Transportation regarding funding under the dedicated gas tax fund for public transportation program 2021 to 2022 guidelines and requirements. Bylaw number 3489-22, to adopt policy number PR006, corporate accessibility policy. Bylaw number 3490-22, to repeal bylaw number 3455-21, a bylaw to authorize the sale of municipal land described as Plan M, Lot 52, 53, and 54, and Plan 1R, 13852, Part 5 and 6 of laneway located on Brock Avenue to William Barner, and authorize the municipality of Wawa to purchase land described as an 8-foot laneway, Plan 1R, 13852, Part 3 from William Barner.
All in favor? Carried. We move into 14, closed session.
Moved by Councillor Hatfield, seconded by Councillor Cannon, resolved that this committee proceed in camera at 9:34 p.m. In order to address the following matters pertaining to a legal issue, there's 3 items. The first one is request to purchase property. Second is a request to purchase property, consent to sever, and permission to build driveway. And C, the third one is an offer to donate property. It's related to a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or the board. And the fourth item is a legal issue, Bucks Marina, and it's related to the security of the municipality or local board. Thank you very much. Yes, please. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Looking to go back into open,
Go back and open.
go back and open.
Yeah, go back and open.
So I'll just go ahead and read this now.
Yes.
Okay, we've had an unfortunate incident in Walnut tonight, and I'd like to clarify some things. Drinking water information notice, Tuesday, April 5th, 2022. The municipality of Walnut is advising users of an incident that had occurred at the water treatment plant, which resulted in elevated chlorine levels throughout the distribution system. The municipality, through collaboration with the Algoma Public Health, is advising users that due to the elevated chlorine levels, the water may smell or taste different, but at this time, a health hazard does not exist, and the water is still safe for drinking and bathing. We are working diligently to decrease the chlorine levels to ensure they return to a level in which smell or taste will no longer be an issue. Please see below for more information on chlorine disinfectant and simple actions you can take to help reduce chlorine levels in your tap water. What is chlorine? Chlorine is the most commonly used disinfectant added to drinking water to reduce or eliminate disease causing germs such as bacteria or viruses, which can be present in water supplies. What we are doing to resolve the problem: monitoring the chlorine levels in the system, flushing water from the distribution system as needed. We will notify the community promptly if chlorine levels do reach a level posing a risk hazard, posing risk to health. This is not expected at this time. What you can do to remove chlorine from the drinking water: fill a jug with water in the morning and let it sit in the open air or in the refrigerator. Chlorine will evaporate in the open air. Drink throughout the day. Consider boiling the water and let it cool to aid the chlorine evaporation. Drink throughout the day. Run water through a filter activated charcoal. Flush your taps. What can you do while bathing or showering? Reduce the total time of showering or bathing to avoid irritation. Minimize direct prolonged contact with the eyes. The entire community serviced by the municipal drinking water, including Michigan River, is affected. As more information evolves, the municipality will keep everyone informed. For the information, please contact their office, 705-856-2244, extension 251. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. We will report back to council on the events of today.
Any other questions?
Sorry. The Phenom conference, it says if anybody has any questions, that we have to have them in by April 29th. So I don't know if council, anybody on council or needs to has any questions? Thanks.
Next meeting date will be April 19th. During the meeting, we have a motion.
Moved by Councillor Cannon, seconded by Councillor Hatfield, resolved that the meeting close at 10:03 p.m.
All in favor?